So, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Augustine. I am the editor-in-chief for the Cyber Express. We have Holly Foxcroft. She is the head of neurodiversity in cyber research at Stott and May Consulting. More than that, I think she was recently listed among the guardians of cyberspace. So please join me in welcoming Holly to the Cyber Express.
Hi,
So
thanks for having me.
welcome. Yeah. So I think basically I think there are a lot of things we can probably begin with. But I think one of the major conversations that is usually there is around cybersecurity skill gap. And it has just increasing. And this is one place where I remember having a conversation with another person who actually also represented a very similar field. He brought up this topic, topic about hiring folks from the neurodiverse spectrum. So, what do you think that is the solution?
I don't think it's the solution. However, I do think that it is a topic within understanding this skills gap. I personally, I'm going to take a bit of a different approach here.
Right.
I don't think that there's a skills gap. I think that we're not understanding our candidates and we're looking for people and our expectations are wrong. And this will again highlight that individuals who are neurodivergent, who are diagnosed or identify or don't know that they are neurodivergent, are facing barriers when it comes to employment. Now, individuals who have cyber and technology and digital skills seem to be, that data would suggest that individuals in this career space have higher likely to be neurodivergent or characteristics of neurodivergent conditions. Okay. So what we would need to do is, yes, there's a higher chance of finding candidates who are suitable for these roles, but they're facing social barriers because of the way that we recruit, the way that we look for individuals, and in that onboarding process. So if we look to change that, if we look to change what our understanding is of neurodiversity, and particularly neurodivergent conditions and individuals, not that we're expecting people to become experts in this field, but rather focus on individual need and removing that subconscious bias that we have or organizations can have when they recruit in their own image. So it's about actually changing how you recruit as a whole and becoming more inclusive. Okay. But why I would say it's kind of vital in cyber, and this is where it becomes quite interesting, is research has suggested, and government agencies globally have identified that within their pathways into cybercrime and for their convicted cyber offenders, there has been a higher number of individuals who are neurodivergent.
Right.
Now, personally, I come to this with an understanding that we should look at the vulnerabilities of neurodivergent conditions, and that's how we must approach it, with the lens of looking through and understanding that. But if our adversaries are neurodivergent, then our best asset to understanding the human thought process or the logic is then hiring a diverse team. You know, by nature, cybersecurity is diverse. So we need to replicate that. And we need an altered and different way of thinking, processing, and seeing. So that's why neurodiversity is categorically imperative. It's so important for when we're looking at building a cybersecurity team.
Wow. Okay, I think we'll come to a couple of parts. One, of course, in terms of support, I think that is where the problem begins, especially when they are hired. There is a lack of support. There is imposter syndrome, and then of course there is this unconscious bias among people. So this, I think the change probably should begin from there. So from that perspective, how do you think, senior staff and even business leaders can be educated more on the subject?
So taking the subject of neurodiversity and wanting to perhaps look at that recruitment and look at ensuring that you are at your best, your cyber team is at your best. This is a strategic move from the offset. This is where that first move needs to come from. And it's not about just focusing on your recruitment. If you just target wanting to hire individuals because they're neurodivergent, but without addressing the home, then you're not going to keep a neurodivergent team. So the first thing that a leader, a senior leader or a board advisor needs to look at is, what does the culture look like in the organization for supporting an individual's needs? It's not about supporting autism. It's not about supporting ADHD. It's about what your reasonable adjustments and your cultural bias looks like at addressing an individual that may be socially different, or their needs are different, their specific learning objectives are specific learning ways of learning is different. So once you start looking at just being inclusive in general, that's the cultural change, and that's how it needs to be first, and you need to address that first. Now,
Okay.
DE&I initiatives are huge, and we're neurodiversity still has this negative kind of stigma attached to it, and misunderstanding, and that can come from media representation. Autism has been seen as a very linear diagnosis, in that you are either Rain Man or you're either Einstein. It's not understanding that each individual experiences things differently and their characteristics are different. So you're only going on what you think you know about a diagnosis. And unfortunately, that has been quite negative up until now.
Okay.
And the way that we are looking to, or particularly the way that I'm looking to support employers and organizations, is by approaching it with the social model of disability. And that a lot of neurodivergent individuals are made disabled, and we face these barriers because of social expectations that are placed upon us, and social barriers which is considered normal. And once we start to look to remove what those barriers are and the way that we do things, our culture of understanding and our bias of conditions, then we can start to be more inclusive and welcome a more diverse workforce.
You did mention a couple of times about a top-down approach. What does that exactly mean?
Top-down approach, in that when we say a culture change, it needs to come from leadership, so that the processes and way that we do things. So designing your policy. And when I say policy, I'm going to talk about a neuro-inclusive policy, and just your policy design and your language and communication internally. So by creating a neuro-inclusive policy is by saying, this is just how we do things. It's about making voices heard within your organization, in that saying, I want to be more neuro-inclusive, and I'm going to turn to the people within my business, and I'm going to build a mentorship program for supporting people. By leaders holding their hands up and saying, I don't know how to do this, I'm not an expert, and seeking support. Because unfortunately, like cybersecurity skills gap is a buzzword, neurodiversity is becoming a buzzword, and lots of people are talking about it, but actually actioning, taking that commitment to actioning and getting the right support from the individuals that know neurodiverse or neurodivergent, which are people who are neurodivergent themselves, may I add. Right. And actually getting that external support and creating change. Now, looking at what your communication looks like. What does your management understand? about supporting neurodivergent individuals? What does your reasonable adjustment policies look like into understanding an individual's need? When CISOs or CTOs and board level, it's about having the conversations as to what budget looks like. Put money where your mouth is and actually understand, if you want to be this, then how can you support it? I mean, we can all talk about initiatives and saying, we're going to start doing this, but how are you going to actually support that and make sure that it is supported in 3, 6, 9, and 12 months from now? If there's a business change, a change in the business, if a person leaves, how are you going to make sure that it's going to carry on? And that's from weaving back into your policy design, and this is how we do things here. Being inclusive is not just we're going to do this and then it's yesterday's news. It needs, once you start that, you need to make sure that it is continued. And the way that that is continued is through management and making sure that the practices that you put forward in your policy is carried forward.
Well, beautifully said. Okay, to add, I think historically cybersecurity has actually not been a very inclusive, industry as such. The representation of women was 11% for close to 6 years, and then it reached 24, and then it has been stagnant there for now good 5 years now. I mean, is it the right space?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if we look at academic research within neurodiversity and cyber skills is quite limited. However, there's lots of, because of neurodiversity and because of, unfortunately, the offender side, there is more research being conducted into our industry.
Right.
Now, is it the space? Yes, because what research has uncovered is that there is a higher percentage of digital skills and cyber skills in the neurodivergent community. So the neurodivergent community show a better aptitude, understanding, and because of the way their brain, it's not their brain in total, but some of their brains work, it is linear to the skills of what you would want in a cybersecurity employee. We're analytical, we do see things differently, we spot patterns, we're hyper-focused, we understand, we have a creative way of thinking that is completely different. And when we think of cybersecurity, we need to think creatively. We need to be very analytical, spotting those patterns and understanding, and that altered way of thinking is critical to having a cybersecurity employee.
Okay. I think probably this should have been the first question, or I should have begun with this. How did you come into this space, and then your entire exploration about cybersecurity? What was your journey like?
Oh, it's kind of two stories. So it's the cyber journey and the neurodivergent story, which came first, the chicken or the egg, really. So cyber came, well, no, actually neurodiversity came first because that came from birth.
Right.
I am neurodivergent. I didn't know until later in life, which is very common for females, because we mask and our characteristics can be different from men, and because of societal expectations of what a female should be, often we aren't picked up as being neurodivergent.
Right.
And following on that neurodivergent and neurodiversity, my son is autistic with ADHD. And that kind of really started my head into understanding particularly his world, but then obviously that wider wanting to have it more socially understood, and not accepting the medicinal barriers that he's medically disabled, when actually I could see that if society changed certain tweaks, then he could still do the things that they said he never could. And that's when I really started on wanting it to be more inclusive. and his diagnosis did not define him. And it was actually his pediatrician advised me to get tested. Yeah, so this neurodiversity, that's where that kind of started. Now, if I put in the cyber side, that started in the military. Actually started with electronic warfare, and then merging into the interest of cybersecurity and cyber warfare. I started technical recruiting, and that's when, having been armed with the understanding of neurodiversity, I started to see the trend within the candidates that I was working with as showing characteristics of being neurodivergent. And having open conversations, if I'm honest, with these candidates, and noticing that although they had the right skills and aptitude, they were constantly being met by barriers because of communication skills, interviews, and how they would feel uncomfortable with going to certain employers. So I went to an autism event, and it was an employment event, and I wanted to talk about, you know, cybersecurity is a great career, and there's lots of people who seem to be, and we're going to just talk about autism here. And I met a government agent there who worked for the National Crime Agency. And that's when we had the conversation of actually quite a lot of young offenders are displaying characteristics of being neurodivergent. And it was within cybercrime. So that's where that started to come in and weave in. And then alongside the cybersecurity challenge, who supports young individuals in developing cybersecurity skills, a lot of those individuals were neurodivergent that were joining the cybersecurity challenge or part of that movement. So we all had a discussion together that we were going to put on a day, this is back in 2017, where employers can see that the students who are neurodivergent through the cybersecurity challenge can see their skills, can see that, you know, they have got these skills, being at quite a young age as well. Running alongside of that, I ran the employment side of why we should look to employ and support these individuals, why it works, and how we can start a movement together. And that was the volcano. That's where it all started to erupt, and the start of the two worlds coming together. Now, I then started looking at the educational side of cyber, in that the individuals, particularly young offenders, the age of these offenders will shock people. They are very young, some below the age of criminal responsibility in the UK, which is 13. So learning that digital skill is currently absent in schools. So they're self-learning, and that self-learning isn't governed. So that's why they're falling into these early pathways to cybercrime. And this really resonated with me because of my son, who was showing coding skills from the age of 5. So, you know, I for my personal reasons, I wanted to make sure that if he wanted to go into that type of career, and other individuals like him who are more vulnerable, they are vulnerable young adults and can be vulnerable adults when they grow older, that they are supported. And because of the cybersecurity skills gap, I wanted, you know, there's a skills gap because we're not teaching them. Right. And that education at university is otherwise unattainable, particularly for people who can be neurodivergent. Not saying that it is, but it can be. It can be difficult. So I started developing cybersecurity in further education, which is college level. And then, as I mentioned earlier, there's a lack in research, and I actually conducted my own academic research into understanding cybercrime offenders who are neurodivergent, but not just looking at autism. I actually expanded it into understanding co-occurring neurodivergent conditions with others and why we should look at it through the lens of vulnerability. Now that then supports understanding the condition and having my understanding of cybersecurity. It's put me into the position I am in today, which is helping support employers and organization into being neuro-inclusive, being neuro-inclusive recruiters, and to further support industry by feeding in the latest industry insights with regards to neurodivergence and cybersecurity, and how we can further support industry itself and academia feed back into the fountain of knowledge as to what we know about this phenomenon.
Great. Okay. Beautiful journey. I think no, that's the whole thing. So no, usually I think in most of our interviews it's just a conversation. I don't sit and listen for so long. I was just lost. It was amazing.
Talk about this all day. How long have we got?
But actually, I think an incredible journey, yes, and I just love the part where you mentioned how it began and how your son paved way for a lot of your own stuff. Probably explore. So you're optimistic at the end of the day.
I'm very, and I mean,
yeah.
And it really resonated me when it was announced that I was a guardian of cyberspace, because that is how I see it. Like cyberspace, the internet is for everyone, and our connective technologies enables people otherwise with barriers, particularly specific learning conditions, which fall under the neurodiversity paradigm, like dyslexia, dyspraxia. Cyberspace enables that for a lot of people that otherwise don't have the chance or are met by barriers. And being named as a guardian of cyberspace, that's exactly what I want to do. I want to ensure that the internet stays safe for people, and that's kind of seen in the research that I conducted. It's a dangerous place, and supporting people who are neurodivergent when they're in their adolescent years into finding their way and finding their skills that can support cyber and support cybersecurity and support their digital citizenship is so important to me. I also support my local city into teaching our educators to be digital champions and to support our students in understanding online harms, how to build digital citizenship, in the breath that they will then go on to develop their own digital skills and become the digital city, which is Portsmouth. And it's something I'm really passionate about.
Oh. Wow. All right, I think so. A good thing is that there were a dozen of questions, but then you answered most of it already.
Okay.
So anything else, any closing notes for us? And honestly, I think we are really proud that you are among the guardians. I think well-deserved one.
Thank you. When I win nominations or when I am nominated, it's never for me. It's for the community of people for which I support and which I use my voice to elevate inclusion for. So I guess it's not just a thank you from me, it's a thank you for the neurodivergent individuals, particularly within cyber, that can see we're starting to make change.
Wow. Well, Holly, again, lastly, amazing talking to you. It was a very beautiful and very insightful conversation.
I just want to shout from the rooftops about how we can make this change and developments. And it really is, it's actually about protecting cybersecurity. It really, really is, because we need to elevate the voices of people who are neurodivergent, who otherwise feel like they can't or they don't have access to be able to talk. So yeah, that's why I say it's not for me, it's for everyone that's behind me as well. So
totally.
please, I'd love to hear more
Thanks,
about
Eden.
that, and I'd love
Sure.
to support you.
Sure
Thank
thing.
you, 𝗚ģistin.
Thank you so much. It
Have a
was
lovely
amazing talking to you.
evening, if I've got my times right.
Yes,
It's evening now
yes.
for you, isn't
It's
it?
evening.
Go and get
Thank
some
you so
dinner.
much. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Take care.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.